I'm Tom, 62 years old, and I've spent 29 years rebuilding boat engines for luxury yachts across New England from my shop here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. When my son-in-law Xander called me a family embarrassment at his wedding reception, pointing to my work clothes in front of 300 guests, I quietly stepped outside and made one phone call. By the time their honeymoon was over, his entire world had changed. Hey everyone, if stories of justice and family drama interest you, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below about your own family wedding experiences. Your support means everything to us. The whole disaster started at my daughter Willow's wedding at the Wentworth by the sea. I'd driven straight from the marina after finishing an emergency repair on a client's 50-foot Bertram. The wedding was supposed to start at 6, and I'd barely made it by 5:30. Sure, I still had some grease under my fingernails and my dress shirt wasn't perfect, but I was there for my little girl's big day. The ceremony was beautiful. Willow looked stunning in her grandmother's wedding dress, the one I'd carefully preserved after my wife passed away 5 years ago. I walked her down the aisle with tears in my eyes, remembering all the father-daughter dances we'd shared in our living room when she was little. After losing her mother to cancer, Willow and I had grown incredibly close. She'd spent countless hours in my shop, learning about engines and boats, dreaming about the yacht she'd own someday. During the cocktail hour, I mingled with the guests, talking boats with several yacht owners who recognized me from my work. My reputation in the marine restoration business had earned me clients from Martha's Vineyard to Bar Harbor. I'd restored engines for some of the most exclusive yacht clubs in New England, including several boats worth over $2 million each. The precision work I did commanded premium prices because yacht owners knew I was the best at what I did. Everything seemed perfect until the reception began. Xander, my new son-in-law, stood up to give his groom's speech. He started talking about new beginnings and how marriage meant leaving behind certain elements of your past that didn't fit your new lifestyle. Then he looked directly at me and said, "Some people show up to elegant occasions looking like they just crawled out of a garage. That's the kind of family embarrassment we're leaving behind as we start our sophisticated new life together." The entire reception fell silent. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. My face burned with humiliation as guests began whispering and pointing. Willow looked mortified, but she didn't say anything to defend me. She just sat there, staring at her plate, while her new husband continued his speech about their plans to move to Boston and join the country club set. Xander worked in finance, making decent money, but nothing extraordinary. What he didn't know was that I'd been quietly funding their lifestyle for the past 2 years. The down payment on their house, Willow's car, even the $28,000 wedding they were celebrating. All paid for by the embarrassing father who apparently didn't meet their social standards. I stood there for another minute, watching my daughter avoid eye contact while her husband basked in the laughter from his friends. That's when I realized something had fundamentally changed. The little girl who used to hand me wrenches and dream about boats had become someone who was ashamed of the man who raised her. I quietly walked outside to the hotel's waterfront terrace, pulled out my phone, and made a call to my attorney. Then I made another call to my bank. By the time I returned to the reception 20 minutes later, the wheels were already in motion for what would become the most satisfying piece of justice I'd ever engineered. I smiled, finished my dinner, and even danced with a few family friends. But inside, I was already planning exactly how Xander would learn to appreciate the value of hard work and the people who make his comfortable life possible. The humiliation at the wedding wasn't the first time Xander had shown his true colors, but it was definitely the moment that broke the camel's back. For the past 2 years, since he'd started dating Willow, I'd watched him gradually poison her mind against everything she used to value about our family and our way of life. When Willow first brought Xander home to Portsmouth, I tried to be welcoming. He worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized investment firm in Boston, making around $75,000 a year. Decent money, but nothing spectacular. What bothered me wasn't his income, but his attitude about mine. He'd walk through my shop with this disgusted expression, like the smell of marine oil and the sight of engine parts personally offended him. I remember the first time he saw me working on a 1967 Chris Craft Constellation. The owner was a Boston lawyer who'd inherited the boat from his father and wanted it restored to museum quality. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, worth about $400,000 when finished. I was rebuilding the twin big block Chevy engines, a job that would net me $45,000 in labor alone. Xander watched me for about 5 minutes, then told Willow loud enough for me to hear, "I don't understand why your father chooses to work with his hands when he could do something more respectable." That comment stung because I'd built my business from nothing. I started as an apprentice mechanic at 18, saved every penny, and slowly built a reputation as the go-to guy for high-end marine restoration along the entire New England coast. My client list read like a who's who of East Coast wealth. I'd worked on boats for tech executives, pharmaceutical company owners, and old money families whose yachts had been in their families for generations. These weren't people who cared about pretense. They cared about quality work and trusted craftsmanship. They paid premium prices because they knew I was the best. But Xander couldn't see past the grease under my fingernails. He started making subtle comments about Willow deserving better and how she should be embarrassed to bring friends around the shop. Gradually, my daughter stopped visiting as often. The girl who used to spend Saturday mornings helping me organize parts and learning about different engine types suddenly became too busy for our father-daughter time. The real problems started when they decided to buy a house together. Willow came to me asking for help with the down payment on a $300,000 colonial in Kittery. She was working as a dental hygienist making $38,000 a year, and Xander's salary wasn't enough to qualify for the mortgage they wanted. I didn't hesitate. I wrote a check for $60,000 to make their dream home possible. Then came Willow's car troubles. Her old Honda had finally given up after 200,000 miles, and she needed reliable transportation. Xander insisted she needed something appropriate for their new neighborhood, so I helped them buy a brand new Toyota Camry for $28,000. Again, I covered the down payment and the first year of payments. Next was the wedding planning. Xander had grand ideas about a sophisticated celebration that would impress his Boston friends and colleagues. The Grove Park Inn venue alone cost $15,000, the photographer was another $4,000, and the catering ran $22,000 for 400 guests. When their budget fell short, guess who got the call? I quietly transferred another $35,000 to cover the difference. Through all of this, Xander never once thanked me directly. If anything, his attitude toward me got worse. He started making comments about charity cases and how successful people shouldn't need help from their families. He convinced Willow that accepting money from me was somehow beneath them, even as they continued cashing my checks. The worst part was watching my daughter change. The confident, independent young woman I'd raised became someone who apologized for her father's profession. She started making excuses for why I couldn't meet certain friends or attend certain events. When Xander's parents visited from Connecticut, Willow asked me to stay away from the house because she didn't want them to get the wrong impression about our family. By the time their wedding day arrived, I knew our relationship had been fundamentally damaged, but I still hoped that once they were married and settled, things might improve. I thought maybe Xander would mature and realize that family meant more than social status. Instead, he chose their wedding reception, the event I'd largely paid for, to publicly humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered to our family. That's when I realized that quiet generosity and patient tolerance weren't working. It was time for Xander to learn some hard lessons about respect, gratitude, and the real value of the people he so casually dismissed. The moment that truly broke me wasn't just the public humiliation at the wedding. It was what happened afterward that showed me exactly who my daughter had become and how completely Xander had poisoned her against me. After his speech, I spent the rest of the reception watching the other guests' reactions. Some looked embarrassed for me, others whispered behind their hands, and a few of Xander's Boston friends actually laughed and made additional comments about blue-collar types who don't know their place. I smiled, danced with my sister-in-law, and played the part of the gracious father who could take a joke. But Willow's reaction cut deeper than anything Xander had said. She never once approached me to apologize or even acknowledge what had happened. She laughed at her husband's jokes, posed for pictures with his family, and acted like publicly humiliating her father was just part of the evening's entertainment. When I tried to catch her eye during the father-daughter dance, she looked right through me like I was invisible. The real breaking point came 3 days later when I called to check on them before they left for their honeymoon in Napa Valley. I figured maybe Willow would have some regrets about how things went down. Maybe we could talk things through before they traveled. Instead, I got a lecture. "Dad, you need to understand that Xander and I are starting a new life," she said, her voice cold and distant. "We're moving in different social circles now, and frankly, your whole blue-collar thing is becoming embarrassing. Xander's partners are sophisticated people. They own yachts. They don't fix them." I nearly dropped the phone. "Willow, honey, I own a successful business. I've worked on boats worth more than most people's houses. My clients respect—" "Dad, stop," she interrupted. "You don't get it. Getting your hands dirty for money isn't the same as real success." Xander went to Dartmouth. His father owns commercial real estate. These aren't people who would understand what you do. That's when she delivered the final blow. We've decided it would be better if you didn't visit the new house for a while. At least not until you can learn to dress appropriately and maybe take some social etiquette classes. Xander thinks you could benefit from learning how to interact with people from better backgrounds. I sat there in my shop, surrounded by the engines that had built our comfortable life, listening to my daughter tell me I wasn't good enough for her new husband's social circle. The same daughter I'd raised alone after her mother died. The same girl I'd worked 16-hour days to put through dental hygiene school without any student loans. The same young woman whose every dream I'd funded while she told me I was an embarrassment. And another thing, she continued. We won't be needing any more financial help. Xander says it's important that we make it on our own from now on. He doesn't want people thinking he married me for my family's money. That last comment was rich, considering my family money was the only reason they had a house, cars, or the wedding they'd just celebrated. But what really stung was realizing that Willow had completely bought into Xander's narrative about social status and class hierarchy. After I hung up, I sat in my shop for 2 hours, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. I looked at the 1967 Chris Craft I was restoring, worth more than Xander made in 5 years. I thought about the client who owned it, a Harvard-educated surgeon who treated me with more respect than my own daughter did. I considered my bank account, built through 30 years of specialized skills and careful business management, and realized I'd been funding my own humiliation. That evening, I drove down to the marina and walked among the boats I'd worked on over the years. 40-footers, 60-footers, even a few massive motor yachts worth 8 figures. Each one represented not just my craftsmanship, but relationships with successful people who valued quality work and honest dealing. These clients didn't care about my social background, they cared about results. Standing on the dock, watching the sunset over Portsmouth Harbor, I made a decision that would change everything. If Xander and Willow wanted to play social games and pretend they were better than the man who'd made their lifestyle possible, then it was time they learned what life looked like without my embarrassing support. But this wouldn't be about anger or revenge. This would be about education. They needed to understand the real value of hard work, the importance of respect, and the consequences of biting the hand that feeds you. Most importantly, they needed to learn that true class isn't about where you went to school or what your father does. It's about how you treat the people who've helped you along the way. I walked back to my truck with a plan forming in my mind, one that would teach them these lessons in a way they'd never forget. The next morning, I called my attorney, Margaret Henderson, who'd been handling my business and personal legal matters for 15 years. Margaret understood my situation immediately. She'd watched me build my business from nothing and had seen how generously I'd supported Willow over the years. "Tom, what exactly are you thinking?" she asked after I explained the wedding incident and Willow's phone call. "I want to teach them about consequences," I said, "but I want to do it legally and in a way that makes a lasting impression. They think I'm just some blue-collar embarrassment who doesn't understand their sophisticated world. Time to show them how sophisticated business really works." Margaret and I spent 3 hours going over my options. The beautiful thing about having funded so much of their lifestyle was that I'd been careful about documentation. Every major purchase, every loan, every financial gift had been properly recorded. What Xander and Willow didn't understand was that while I'd been generous, I'd also been smart about protecting myself legally. The house in Kittery was the key piece. When I'd provided the $60,000 down payment, I hadn't just written a check and walked away. My attorney had structured it as a private loan with very specific terms. The paperwork clearly stated that if certain conditions weren't met, including maintaining a respectful family relationship, the loan would become immediately due and payable in full with interest. Xander had been so eager to close on the house that he'd signed the documents without reading them carefully. Willow had trusted me completely back then, assuming her father would never do anything to hurt her. They were both about to learn that business is business, even within families. The car situation was even more interesting. The Toyota Camry was financed through my business credit line, with me as the primary borrower and Willow as an authorized user. Legally, I owned the vehicle until the loan was paid in full. Since they'd informed me they no longer wanted my financial assistance, that created an immediate problem for them. But the wedding expenses were where I could really make my point. The checks I'd written for the venue, catering, and photography had all been structured as business expenses through my company. As a marine restoration specialist, I occasionally hosted client appreciation events and business dinners. Margaret had properly categorized their wedding expenses as promotional events for Tom Marine Restoration, which meant I could legitimately claim them as business deductions. However, since Xander had publicly stated that he didn't want to be associated with my blue-collar business, I could make a strong legal argument that using my business funds for their wedding constituted fraud. After all, how could their wedding promote a business they were actively distancing themselves from? My plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would give them exactly what they'd asked for: complete independence from my embarrassing financial support. The loan documents would be enforced to their full legal extent. The car would be repossessed since they no longer qualified for the financing without my backing, and I would demand repayment of the wedding expenses since they'd made it clear they didn't want to be associated with my business. Margaret loved the irony. So you're going to teach them about sophisticated business practices by actually conducting sophisticated business? Exactly, I replied. Xander thinks successful people don't get their hands dirty. He's about to learn that the most successful people are the ones who read contracts carefully and understand the fine print. But I wasn't going to stop there. I had 30 years of relationships in the marine industry, and many of my clients moved in the same social circles Xander was so desperate to join. A few phone calls to the right people could ensure that his name became well known in Boston's boating community, not for the reasons he'd want. I also planned to make some strategic business moves that would demonstrate exactly how embarrassing my blue-collar work really was. I'd been considering expanding my operation for years, maybe opening a second location or investing in some of the high-end marina properties around Portsmouth. Now seemed like the perfect time to make some very visible, very expensive business moves. The final piece of my plan involved timing. Xander and Willow were leaving for their Napa Valley honeymoon in 2 days. They'd be gone for 10 days, completely unreachable and focused on their romantic getaway. By the time they returned to Portsmouth, their entire financial situation would have changed dramatically. They wanted to be independent from my support. They were about to get their wish in ways they never imagined. They thought I was an embarrassment who didn't understand their sophisticated world. They were about to discover that real sophistication meant understanding contracts, maintaining relationships, and treating people with respect. Most importantly, they were about to learn that success isn't about where you went to school or what your father does. It's about building something valuable with your own hands and treating the people who help you with gratitude instead of contempt. While Xander and Willow were packing for their Napa Valley honeymoon, I was methodically setting the pieces in motion for their very expensive education. The beauty of my plan was that everything I was doing was completely legal, properly documented, and exactly what any smart businessman would do when faced with ungrateful clients. My first call was to Thomas Bradley at First National Bank of Portsmouth, where I'd been banking for 28 years. Tom had financed my business expansion 3 times and knew my financial situation better than anyone. When I explained that I needed to call in some private loans due to changed family circumstances, he understood immediately. "Tom, you've always been one of our most reliable customers," Tom said. "If you need to restructure some personal loans for business reasons, we can absolutely help you with that. What kind of timeline are we looking at?" "I need the paperwork served while they're out of state," I replied. "They've made it clear they want complete financial independence from me. I'm just helping them achieve that goal faster than they expected." Tom chuckled. "I've seen this before with family businesses. Sometimes people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. We'll have the loan acceleration notices prepared by tomorrow morning." Next, I called Jake Morrison at New England Auto Recovery. Jake's company handled repossessions for most of the banks and credit unions in the area. More importantly, Jake was a client. I'd restored the engines on his 42-foot sport fisherman 2 years ago, and we'd become friends through our shared love of fishing. "Tom, what can I do for you?" Jake asked. "I need a vehicle recovered, but I want it done professionally and respectfully," I explained. "It's a family situation, and I don't want any drama or damage to the car. Just clean, legal repossession according to the contract terms." Jake knew better than to ask too many questions. "Send me the paperwork and the location. We'll take care of it quietly and by the book. The vehicle will be stored safely until you decide what to do with it." The most satisfying call was to Richard Whitmore, who owned Whitmore Marina, the most exclusive yacht club in Portsmouth. Richard and I had worked together for years. His members trusted my restoration work, and I'd made him a lot of money by bringing high-end projects to his facility. More importantly, Richard moved in exactly the social circles that Xander was desperate to join. Richard, I need a favor, I said. I'm planning to make some significant business investments, and I want to make sure the right people know about them. What kind of investments? He asked. I'm considering purchasing that waterfront property on Market Street that's been for sale, the one with the deep water access. I'm thinking about expanding Tom Marine Restoration into a full-service yacht facility. Restoration, storage, concierge services for high-end clients. Richard was immediately interested. Tom, that property would be perfect for what you're describing. The location alone is worth $2 million, and with your reputation, you could charge premium prices for premium services. I know at least a dozen members who would move their boats to a facility like that. I'm also looking at acquiring some of the smaller marine businesses around the harbor, I continued. Consolidate the market, offer comprehensive services under one roof. Maybe bring in some younger partners who understand both traditional craftsmanship and modern business practices. What I didn't mention was that I was specifically looking for partners who had Ivy League educations and could speak Xander's language. If he wanted to play social games, I could play them better than he imagined. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything for my attorney. Every conversation, every contract modification, every business decision was being carefully recorded. If Xander tried to claim I was retaliating against him personally, I had mountains of evidence showing that I was simply making sound business decisions based on changed circumstances. I also reached out to my network of clients and colleagues throughout New England. Casual conversations about my business expansion plans, mentions of ungrateful family members who didn't appreciate the marine industry, stories about young people who thought traditional craftsmanship was beneath them. Word travels fast in tight-knit industries, especially when it involves social dynamics and family drama. The final piece was preparing my shop for what was coming. I knew that once Xander and Willow returned from their honeymoon and discovered their new financial reality, there would be phone calls, visits, and probably some very emotional conversations. I wanted to make sure they saw exactly how embarrassing my blue-collar business really was. I scheduled delivery of a new Haas CNC machine worth $80,000, upgraded my computer-aided design system, and arranged for installation of a new paint booth that would rival anything in Boston. If they were going to come crawling back asking for help, they'd see that their embarrassing father ran a more sophisticated operation than they'd ever imagined. By the time they boarded their plane to California, every piece was in place. In 10 days, they would return to discover that actions have consequences, contracts have meaning, and family relationships require mutual respect to survive. They wanted independence from my support. They were about to get it in full measure. 3 days into Xander and Willow's honeymoon, I began executing my plan with the precision I'd learned from 30 years of rebuilding complex marine engines. Every piece had to be timed perfectly. Every action had to be legal and documented. And the whole operation had to run smoothly without any unnecessary drama. The first domino fell on Thursday morning when Jake Morrison's team quietly repossessed the Toyota Camry from their driveway in Kittery. The neighbors probably thought it was just another repo in the neighborhood. They had no idea they were witnessing the beginning of a very expensive lesson about gratitude and respect. Jake called me afterward. "Clean pickup, Tom. No problems, no drama. The car's in perfect condition and stored safely at our facility. What do you want me to do with it?" "Hold on to it for now," I said. "Depending on how the next few days go, I might sell it or I might return it. We'll see how well they learn from this experience." Friday brought the loan acceleration notices. Tom Bradley's bank delivered them via certified mail to both their home address and Willow's workplace. Since they were out of state, the letters would be waiting when they returned. The legal language was clear, due to material changes in the borrower's circumstances and expressed desire to terminate the supportive family relationship. The $60,000 loan for their house down payment was now due in full within 30 days. The beauty of this approach was that it was exactly what any commercial lender would do if a borrower's situation changed dramatically. I wasn't being vindictive. I was being businesslike. Saturday was when things got interesting. I received a panicked call from Dr. Patricia Hayes, Willow's supervisor at the dental practice where she worked. Apparently, the bank had called to verify Willow's employment as part of their loan review process. "Tom, I'm confused," Dr. Hayes said. "Willow told me her car was paid for, but the bank is asking about her ability to make payments on a $28,000 auto loan. Is there something I should know about her financial situation?" "Patricia, Willow and her husband have decided they want complete financial independence from me," I explained. I'm simply honoring their wishes by treating our family arrangements like the business transactions they really are. Dr. Hayes was quiet for a moment. I see. Well, I hope she's prepared for the responsibility. Her salary alone won't cover that car payment along with her other expenses. That afternoon, I made my move at Whitmore Marina. I signed a letter of intent to purchase the waterfront property on Market Street for $2.1 million, contingent on zoning approval for commercial marine operations. Richard Whitmore was thrilled. The commission alone would net him over $60,000. Tom, this is going to be the premier yacht restoration facility in New England, Richard said as we shook hands. My members are going to be very impressed with your vision. Richard, I need to ask you a favor, I said. My new son-in-law works in finance in Boston. Name's Xander Knox, works for Morrison Investment Group. He's been telling people that marine restoration is beneath his social class. I'd appreciate it if you could spread the word about my expansion plans in your network, especially among people who might know his firm. Richard grinned. Consider it done. Nothing I love more than educating young finance types about the real value of skilled craftsmanship. By the time I'm done talking, everyone in Boston's boating community will know about Tom Marine Restoration's new venture. Sunday brought the most satisfying development yet. I received a call from Jonathan Morrison, the senior partner at Morrison Investment Group, Xander's boss. Apparently, word of my business expansion had reached him through the Yacht Club network. Mr. Tom, I understand you're planning a significant expansion of your marine restoration business, Morrison said. We've heard excellent things about your work from several of our clients who own boats. We'd be interested in discussing potential investment opportunities or partnership arrangements. I nearly laughed out loud. Here was Xander's boss calling to explore business opportunities with the family embarrassment that Xander was so ashamed of. But I kept my voice professional. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate your interest. I'm always open to discussions with serious investors who understand the marine industry. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting after I return from some travel next week. Excellent. I'll have my assistant coordinate with you. And Mr. Tom, one of my associates mentioned that you might be related to one of our analysts, Xander Knox. Small world, isn't it? Yes, sir. Small world indeed. By Sunday evening, everything was in motion. Xander and Willow were blissfully unaware, posting pictures of wine tastings and romantic dinners on social media, while their carefully constructed financial life was being systematically dismantled back home. They wanted sophisticated independence? They were about to get a master class in how sophisticated business really works. Monday marked the beginning of what I like to call Education Week. While Xander and Willow were touring Sonoma County, completely oblivious to what was happening back home, the consequences of their arrogance were spreading through their social and professional circles like ripples in a pond. The first call came from Rebecca Chen, Willow's best friend from dental hygiene school. Rebecca had co-signed the lease on Willow's apartment before she moved in with Xander, and apparently she'd been contacted by the apartment complex about some financial irregularities. Tom, I'm really confused, Rebecca said. The apartment manager called asking about Willow's ability to pay her portion of some outstanding bills. I thought she'd moved out months ago when she got engaged. She did move out, Rebecca, but apparently she never properly transferred the utilities or settled the final cleaning fees. Since you co-signed, they're coming after you for the unpaid balances. How much are we talking about? About $800, according to the apartment complex. Willow was supposed to handle all that before the wedding, but I guess it slipped her mind during all the excitement. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Tom, this doesn't sound like Willow. She's always been responsible about money. People change, Rebecca, especially when they start moving in different social circles and forget where they came from. That afternoon brought even better news. Jonathan Morrison called back with an update that made my week. Mr. Tom, I've been asking around about your work, and the feedback is extraordinary, Morrison said. Marcus Whitfield from Boston Harbor Yacht Club told me you restored his 60-foot Hatteras to museum quality. Said it was the finest marine restoration work he'd seen in 40 years. Mr. Whitfield has exquisite taste in boats, I replied. That Hatteras was a 1971 model, completely original, worth about $400,000 when we finished. Here's what's interesting, Morrison continued. Whitfield mentioned that he's been looking for someone to restore a vintage Chris craft for his collection. Apparently, he specifically asked if you might be interested in a project worth around $200,000. I could barely contain my excitement. Marcus Whitfield was one of the most respected collectors in New England, and his endorsement would open doors throughout the luxury marine market. More importantly, Whitfield was on the board of directors at Boston Harbor Yacht Club, exactly where Xander had been hoping to network. "I'd be very interested in discussing that with Mr. Whitfield," I said. "Excellent. I'll arrange an introduction. And Mr. Tom, this might be premature, but we're also exploring the possibility of creating a marine restoration investment fund. High-end boat restoration is becoming quite lucrative, and our clients are always looking for alternative investments with tangible assets." After hanging up, I sat in my shop grinning like a teenager. Xander's own investment firm was courting me for business partnerships while he was off honeymooning, completely unaware that his embarrassing father-in-law was becoming the talk of Boston's marine industry. Tuesday brought the call I'd been expecting. Dr. Hayes phoned to inform me that Willow had missed 2 scheduled patient appointments because she wasn't answering her work phone. Apparently, the dental practice had been trying to reach her about some insurance paperwork that needed immediate attention. "Tom, I hate to involve you in this, but we can't reach Willow, and these insurance forms affect the entire practice," Dr. Hayes explained. "If they're not filed by Friday, we could lose our preferred provider status with 3 major insurance companies. Patricia, I understand your situation, but Willow made it very clear that she doesn't want me involved in her professional life anymore. She said it was embarrassing to have a father who works with his hands." Dr. Hayes was shocked. "She said that? Tom, that's terrible. Everyone here knows how proud she's always been of your business. People change when they get married, Patricia. Sometimes they forget the values they were raised with." Wednesday brought the most satisfying development yet. I received a formal invitation to join the New England Marine Restoration Association's board of directors, a position that would make me one of the most influential people in the regional marine industry. The invitation came with a personal note from the association president, mentioning that several board members had specifically recommended me based on my reputation and business expansion plans. The same day, Richard Whitmore called with news that made everything worthwhile. "Tom, you're not going to believe this," Richard said, barely containing his laughter. "I was at a business dinner last night with some folks from Boston, and your son-in-law's name came up. Apparently, word is spreading in the financial community about Morrison Investment Group's interest in marine restoration. Someone mentioned that one of their analysts is related to the premier marine restoration specialist in New England." How did Xander's colleagues react to that news? Let's just say they were very interested in learning more about the family connections of their colleague who supposedly looks down on marine trades. By Wednesday evening, I had confirmation that my plan was working perfectly. Xander and Willow would return from their honeymoon to discover that the embarrassing father they'd rejected had become one of the most sought-after marine restoration specialists in New England, while their own financial foundation was crumbling beneath their feet. Thursday morning brought the phone call I'd been anticipating all week. Xander's panicked voice crackled through my cell phone from California, where he and Willow had apparently cut their honeymoon short after receiving an emergency call from their bank. "Tom, what the hell is going on?" Xander shouted, abandoning any pretense of civility. "We just got a call saying our car's been repossessed and the bank wants $60,000 immediately or they're foreclosing on our house." I was sitting in my shop, calmly rebuilding a fuel injection system on a 1969 cigarette racing boat worth $300,000. I didn't even pause in my work as I answered. "Hello, Xander. How's Napa Valley? I heard the weather's been beautiful this time of year." "Don't play games with me. What did you do?" "I gave you exactly what you asked for," I replied, setting down my wrench and walking outside to enjoy the morning sunshine. "Complete financial independence from your embarrassing father-in-law. Congratulations, you've achieved your goal." I could hear Willow crying in the background as Xander sputtered with rage. "You can't do this. That money was a gift. The car was a gift." "Actually, Xander, if you'd bothered to read the paperwork before signing it, you'd know that everything was structured as a loan with very specific terms. Terms that included maintaining a respectful family relationship and not publicly humiliating the lender." "This is extortion." "No, son, this is business. You know, the kind of sophisticated business practices they should have taught you at Dartmouth. Loans have terms. Contracts have consequences. Actions have repercussions." There was a long pause before Willow took the phone. Her voice was shaky and desperate. "Daddy, please, we can work this out. We didn't mean—" "Willow, you made your feelings very clear at your wedding reception. I'm a family embarrassment who doesn't understand your sophisticated new lifestyle. I'm simply respecting your wishes by removing myself from your financial affairs. But we can't afford this. The house payment alone is $3,000 a month, and without the car, I can't get to work. That sounds like a problem for sophisticated independent adults to solve, I said. I'm sure Xander's Dartmouth education prepared him for these kinds of challenges. Before either of them could respond, I delivered the knockout punch. Oh, and Xander? You might want to call your boss when you get back to Boston. Jonathan Morrison has been trying to reach you about some exciting new business opportunities. Apparently, Morrison Investment Group is very interested in partnering with Tom Marine Restoration on some high-end projects. Small world, isn't it? The silence on the other end was deafening. I could practically hear Xander's brain processing the implications of what I'd just told him. You see, son, while you were busy being embarrassed by my blue-collar work, I was building relationships with people who actually understand the value of skilled craftsmanship. Your own firm wants to invest in my business because they recognize quality when they see it. Tom, please. Xander's voice had lost all its arrogance, replaced by pure desperation. We can fix this. We can apologize. You can what, Xander? Take back what you said in front of 400 people? Undo the humiliation you put me through at your own wedding? Erase the fact that my daughter told me I needed etiquette classes to be worthy of your social circle? I let that sink in for a moment before continuing. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to fly back to Boston immediately and deal with your financial obligations like adults. You're going to figure out how to pay for the lifestyle you've been living without my embarrassing support. And you're going to learn what real independence actually costs. But the house, Willow started. The house can be saved if you can come up with $60,000 plus interest within 30 days. I'm sure Xander's sophisticated friends will be happy to help. Maybe his father can write a check, since you prefer his kind of money to mine. Please, Daddy, we're sorry. Willow, I spent 2 years watching you become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who was ashamed of the man who raised her, who worked 16-hour days to put her through school, who sacrificed everything to give her the best life possible. Sorry doesn't fix that kind of betrayal. So what happens now? Xander asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Now you learn what it means to stand on your own 2 feet. You wanted to be independent from my embarrassing influence? Congratulations, you've got your wish. I hung up the phone and walked back into my shop where Marcus Whitfield's 1958 Chris Craft Cobra was waiting for me. It was going to be a beautiful day for restoration work. By evening, I'd received 3 more calls from potential clients who'd heard about my business expansion through the Yacht Club network. Word was spreading that Tom Marine Restoration was the premier facility in New England. The family Embarrassment had become the most sought-after marine restoration specialist on the East Coast, while the sophisticated couple was scrambling to avoid foreclosure. Justice had never felt so satisfying. The week following their rushed return from Napa Valley was everything I'd hoped it would be. Xander and Willow discovered that declaring independence from family support comes with a price tag they hadn't calculated, and the sophisticated Boston social circles they'd been so eager to join were watching their financial meltdown with great interest. The first crack in their facade appeared when Dr. Hayes called me Friday afternoon with an update that made my day. Tom, I had to let Willow go, she said, sounding genuinely sorry. She missed 3 days of work this week dealing with her financial crisis, and when she did come in, she was so distracted that she made medication errors with 2 patients. I can't risk that kind of liability in my practice. I understand completely, Patricia. Patient safety has to come first. The thing is, Tom, she spent most of Thursday crying in the break room, telling everyone who would listen about how her father had destroyed her life by calling in some loans. She seemed to think that made her the victim in this situation. I wasn't surprised. Willow had always been quick to blame others when her choices led to uncomfortable consequences. But what Dr. Hayes told me next was even more revealing. Several of my other hygienists asked me about the whole situation, and when I explained what you'd told me about being called a family embarrassment at the wedding, they were shocked. Everyone here has always known how much you've done for Willow over the years. The professional consequences for Xander were even more dramatic. Jonathan Morrison called me Monday morning with news that made the whole situation worthwhile. Tom, I need to discuss a rather delicate situation, Morrison said. It's come to my attention that one of our analysts, Xander Knox, is your son-in-law. and that there have been some family difficulties that might affect our potential business relationship. What kind of difficulties, Mr. Morrison? Well, Xander requested an emergency advance on his salary last week, claiming unexpected family expenses. When our HR department asked for details, he mentioned something about his father-in-law being unreasonable about some family loans. He seemed to think we might be sympathetic since we're considering investing in marine restoration projects. I let Morrison continue without comment. Here's where it gets interesting, Tom. When I mentioned to Xander that we were potentially partnering with Tom Marine Restoration, he became very agitated. He actually told me that you were just a blue-collar mechanic and that our firm shouldn't associate with that kind of business. How did you respond to that? Morrison chuckled. I informed him that Marcus Whitfield from Boston Harbor Yacht Club had personally recommended your work, and that several of our most important clients consider you the premier marine restoration specialist in New England. Xander turned white as a sheet. I imagine he did. Tom, I have to ask, did this young man really call you a family embarrassment at his own wedding? In front of 400 guests, yes, sir. Well, that explains a lot. I've been in business for 35 years, and I've learned that character matters more than credentials. A man who would publicly humiliate the person who's been supporting his lifestyle isn't someone I want representing my firm. The conversation that followed was music to my ears. Morrison Investment Group was not only moving forward with their Marine Restoration Investment Fund, but they were also reconsidering Xander's position with the company. Apparently, his attitude towards skilled trades and his disrespect for family relationships didn't align with the firm's values. Tuesday brought news from Richard Whitmore that was almost too good to be true. Xander had apparently shown up at Whitmore Marina, desperately trying to network his way into some kind of financial opportunity among the yacht club members. Tom, you should have seen it, Richard laughed. This kid walks into my office wearing a $5,000 suit, talking about investment opportunities and asking if any of our members needed financial planning services. When I mentioned that most of our members already knew him as your son-in-law, he actually tried to deny the relationship. He denied being related to me, said there had been some family misunderstandings, and that he wasn't really associated with your business. I told him that was interesting, since several members had specifically asked about doing business with you because of your family connection to someone in Boston finance. The social consequences were spreading through their neighborhood as well. Their next-door neighbor, Carol Martinez, called me Wednesday to ask about buying the Toyota Camry that had been repossessed from their driveway. Tom, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I heard through the grapevine that you might be selling Willow's car, Carol said. My daughter just graduated from college and needs reliable transportation. How did you hear about that, Carol? Well, Willow came over asking if she could borrow my car to get to job interviews. When I asked what happened to her Toyota, she broke down crying and told me the whole story. She seemed to think you were being unreasonable, but honestly, Tom, after hearing what happened at the wedding, I think you're handling this exactly right. By Thursday, their financial situation had become neighborhood gossip. Their professional reputations were in tatters, and the sophisticated social circles they'd been so eager to join were treating them like social pariahs. They'd wanted independence from their embarrassing family connections. They'd gotten exactly what they asked for, and they were learning that independence without preparation is just another word for failure. 6 months later, I'm sitting on the deck of my new flagship facility at Tom Marine Restoration, watching the sunset over Portsmouth Harbor while sipping a beer with Marcus Whitfield, whose 1958 Chris Craft Cobra restoration just won Best in Show at the New England Classic Boat Festival. Tom, I have to tell you, this place exceeded every expectation I had, Marcus said, gesturing toward the state-of-the-art facility that now occupied the entire waterfront property on Market Street. When Jonathan Morrison told me about your expansion plans, I knew it would be impressive, but this is something else entirely. The facility was everything I dreamed of and more. 6 restoration bays, each equipped with computer-controlled climate systems, a paint booth that could handle vessels up to 60 feet, administrative offices that looked more like a high-end law firm than a traditional boat shop, and a client lounge with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor where boat owners could watch their vessels being transformed by master craftsmen. Morrison Investment Group had ultimately invested $3.2 million in the expansion, making them minority partners in what had become the most prestigious marine restoration facility on the East Coast. The irony wasn't lost on me that Xander's former employer was now funding the success of the embarrassing blue-collar business he'd been so ashamed of. The best part, I told Marcus, is that we're booked solid for the next 18 months. Word of mouth in the yacht community travels fast when you deliver quality work. Speaking of word of mouth, Marcus said with a grin, I heard an interesting story at the yacht club last week. Something about your former son-in-law trying to get hired as a dockhand at one of the marinas in Boston Harbor. I nearly choked on my beer. A dockhand? Apparently, after Morrison Investment Group let him go, he's been having trouble finding work in finance. Something about his professional reputation being damaged by character issues and poor judgment regarding family relationships. The maritime industry is smaller than people think, Tom. Word gets around about people who don't respect the trades. The transformation in my own life had been remarkable. Beyond the business success, I'd gained something more valuable, respect from people who mattered, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd built something truly exceptional with my own hands. The New England Marine Restoration Association had elected me as their president, and I was regularly invited to speak at industry conferences about traditional craftsmanship in the modern economy. More importantly, I'd learned to value the relationships with people who appreciated what I did rather than wasting energy on those who didn't. My new circle included yacht owners, marine engineers, master craftsmen, and successful business people who understood that true sophistication meant recognizing excellence wherever you found it. As for Willow and Xander, they'd eventually lost the house in Kittery when they couldn't make the payments or secure refinancing. Xander had taken a job selling insurance for a fraction of his previous salary, while Willow found work at a dental clinic in a less affluent part of Boston. They'd moved into a small apartment and were driving a 10-year-old Honda that Xander's parents had helped them buy. I'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they'd tried to reconcile several times, showing up at my old shop before I moved to the new facility. But the damage went too deep for simple apologies to fix. You can't unsay words like family embarrassment, and you can't undo the choice to prioritize social status over family loyalty. The final piece of justice came 3 months ago when I received a wedding invitation that brought everything full circle. Rebecca Chen, Willow's former best friend, was marrying a young marine engineer who worked for one of my clients. The invitation included a handwritten note. Tom, David, and I would be honored if you'd attend our wedding. We've learned so much about character and values from watching how you handled a difficult family situation with such dignity. I attended that wedding, gave a toast about the importance of building a marriage on mutual respect and shared values, and watched 2 young people who understood that success comes from character, not credentials. Sometimes people ask me if I have any regrets about how things ended with Willow and Xander. The answer is simple. I regret that I raised a daughter who could be influenced to abandon the values I taught her, but I don't regret teaching her that actions have consequences. The most sophisticated lesson I ever learned came from 30 years of working with my hands. Respect has to be earned, relationships require maintenance, and true class isn't about where you went to school. It's about how you treat the people who've helped you build your life. Today, Tom Marine Restoration employs 12 craftsmen, serves clients throughout New England, and has a reputation that opens doors from Boston to Bar Harbor. Not bad for a family embarrassment who works with his hands. Thanks for following this story of family justice and personal triumph. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, respect and gratitude are the foundations of all lasting relationships, whether in family or business.